Audio Jungle.
So what we're doing is the Bosses Only podcast. Welcome, Alvin Lomax. We're glad to have you. And you reached out and found me. Tell me, how did you find us on the internet?
Just marketing, just reaching out to podcasters, and your name came up. So
awesome. It's good to be somewhat popular, I guess. I got a couple of people who watch. Thank you, all you folks out there watching the Bosses Only podcast. Now, I have a first question I love to ask everybody, because everybody who comes on here, we're all entrepreneurs. We all are doing and have done many things. So what do you tell people that you do when they ask you
what do I do for a living? Well, I build relationships with people, particularly professionals who are passionate about the work of their calling and who realize that exchanging time, effort, and energy for money is hindering them really in making the significant and meaningful impacts that they went in their professions in the first place to make. And so through building those relationships, we help people to develop passive streams of income through hands-on commercial real estate investments to give them more streams of income so that they can engage in the work of their calling without having to rely on that for their livelihood.
And that is beautiful. Now, I'm going to be a little bit selfish right now and ask you to kind of give some advice. I had a long conversation last night with my mastermind class, and we were talking about exactly what you just mentioned, which you started off with, I build relationships. And the discussion we were going back and forth on was, we got to have all this material, some sort of visual aid, like a webinar or a pitch deck or a one-pager. And my advice was, if you're leaning back on that, you probably need to lean forward more on your relationships. Can you talk on that a little?
Yes, exactly. I have been attempting to raise capital for a good long while here, and it is impossible to do so when just reaching out and making cold calls with people. It just doesn't happen until the relationship is there. And so I've started building relationships, and it has made all the difference in the world. And I mean, it makes sense to me. Our initial investments are a minimum of $50,000, and most people are investing anywhere from $150 to $250, and they're just not going to invest that money with somebody they don't have a relationship with. So it's all about the relationship.
For sure. We found that as well. And it's been a big challenge to communicate that to new capital raisers, people who are new in the industry. A lot of people come and they want to get directly into capital raising. They might have been an LP for a while, and they come into the GP side. And I always work deals out very similarly. I have a set standard way that I do it. I say there are 3 positions that need to be filled, whether it's 1 person in each position or 10 people in this position and 1 person in the other one. The 3 positions are the deal getter, the money getter, and the administrator. And so I personally administrate all the deals we're doing. And one of the things I do as the administrator is reach out to capital raisers, for example, and bring them into the group. Deal getters, same thing. I teach people how to be deal getters, and then I reach out and network with other deal getters. And so what would you say is a good path? Taking into account like 3 positions, if there's a deal getter, a money getter, and an administrator, what would you say would be a good one, either a good one to start with or a good way to start on either one of the 3?
Well, that's a good question, but I think it depends a whole lot upon the personality. And because they all require a different personality, because they very definitely all require a different skill set. And I think that certainly one of the things that in our program, I always begin with looking at people's character strengths and their basic values. And I think if people are really looking at what their character strengths are, that is really going to help them to determine, are they a deal getter, are they a capital getter, or are they an administrator? And really and truly, we probably have skills in all of those areas, but we are definitely going to excel in one or the other of those. And the deal getter has got to really be the go-getter, and they have to be the one who is building the relationships with brokers, building the relationships with sellers, and they have to have a certain kind of finesse. And really, I think the best ones at that have an outgoing personality. It's not necessarily required, but it's a good idea. And for the capital getter, that's the person who really needs to be able to develop empathic and unconditional relationships and really understand people from a very intimate perspective there. And of course, the administrator is the organizer, and you have to understand systems and how they work and how to essentially put the whole thing together. So when I first went into commercial real estate investing, I was like, well, I'm going to do it all. I had started in single family, and in a single family, you can do it all. And when I got into commercial real estate, well, I was going to do the whole thing, and I was going to be the administrator. I was going to pull it all together. And I went out and made some relationships with brokers. This broker brought me this deal. I did the underwriting, and with the mastermind group I was a part of, we ran that underwriting through the experts, through several of them, came up with an LOI, presented the LOI, and I had one of the worst sleepless nights I have ever had. And I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen if they accept this LOI? Fortunately, they didn't. And that was a wake-up call to me that I am not going to do this on my own. There are fantastic, experienced, excellent teams who already have this all together, and I don't need to build everything from scratch. And I realized that of those three roles, and you're right, those are definitely the three roles in commercial real estate, that I really had the personality for the capital raising.
And that empathic relationship building ability that you have, I looked through your profile some, and you have a background also in counseling. Am I correct?
That's correct.
What would you say that did to help you in that personality trait of empathic relationship building?
Well, it had everything to do with it. And to bring context to this, do you mind if I just share a bit of my story?
Please do.
So I'm a seventh grader, and I'm with my family. We're sitting around the family TV, and on the TV comes this special program on homosexuality. That's the first time I've ever heard the term homosexuality, had no idea what that was or what that meant. But as we're getting into the program, like a ton of rainbow bricks, I am hit with the realization that they're talking about me. And let me tell you, that was not rainbows and unicorns. It was more like Rocky's House of Terrors, and add to that the inferiority I had in terms of intellectual abilities due to undiagnosed dyslexia, and then schoolyard bullies labeling me as Susie. That ended up to decades of what the DSM calls persistent depressive disorder, and yes, I would say it was quite persistent. So anyway, I made it through high school. I did go into college, and in college, my performance was as directionless and as lackluster as my high school performance. And so somehow I made it to the end, graduated, got married, because after all, this gay thing is just a choice, and with enough faith and prayer, it will eventually go away, and so why not get married? well, after dead-end job, my wife finally ended the marriage. And when you're already at rock bottom and there's no place else to go, well, I chose to go into therapy. So the first time in my life I go into therapy, and it was like a light switch to me. One day I was blind, the next day I could see, and I went back to school, got my master's in counseling, attained a university counseling position, got my PhD, became a leader in higher education transformation, and excelled in that job. Along the way, started investing in real estate and developed a considerable amount of wealth through that. And then, lo and behold, 2008 hits, and I am totally and completely wiped out. I lose my job, I lose the identity I had built with my job, and I lose my real estate wealth. Well, here I am at the bottom again, and as I reflect on the great beyond, if you know what I mean just a tad bit of mental health, and I realize that I'm still that seventh grade boy, consumed with homophobic self-hatred, with an intellectual inferiority complex. And so finally, 20 years after going into counseling and getting a degree in counseling and a PhD in psychology, I finally confront the core issues. And I step out of a closet bigger than a Kardashian's and rightly label the intellectual challenge as the dyslexia that it is. And really, for the first time in my life, I really embraced the dyslexia and my fabulous gayness. And I finally feel worthy of self-acceptance and worthy of wealth. And so I've built a passive income. I am still a leader in education. And most importantly, I help others to flourish and to live abundantly in all areas of life. And as far as those schoolyard bullies go, they can call me Susie all they want. That's a pretty fine name. And it's Saturday Night Live. And as I flourish and abundantly, it's I who gets the last laugh. So that's my story there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing that story with us. That is really amazing. That's actually a beautiful transformation to come from all of that pain and to be able to draw yourself up out of it. I'll only share this small part of my story. It was after 2008, very similar situation. Things went bad. Another thing went bad, bad personal, bad emotional, physical, financial, wife gone, money gone, everything, right? I wind up living in a van and trying to get back into real estate. And I was able to pull it all back up in there. And the piece I'd like you to talk about some more, please, is the identity piece. Because I find myself going back all the time, just like you said, I'm that seventh grade year old boy again, being teased by schoolyard bullies. And I mean, even though I lead a mastermind, I tell them all the time, I'm only telling you what I'm trying to figure out too. I might just know this much more than you about it. But can you talk about that identity piece? Because I find myself going back all the time and having trouble, just like you said. I don't deserve this wealth. I don't deserve, I'm still that guy living in a van, barely keeping it together, trying to push deals. Can you talk about the identity piece?
Well, I'm like you. I don't have it totally and completely figured out, but do we ever? And if we do get it all figured out, then what do we do? Stop growing? And where does that lead? That's not really where we want to go. But you said it took me 20 years after first going into counseling before I really could look at those core issues that were still there and still not confronted. And until we really get to the core of what our issues are, and I just told you my story, but everybody has their story and everybody has a seventh grade experience. We've all been traumatized. And like me, we don't want to deal with that. We want to stuff that in a closet and pretend it really didn't happen. And the only way we can really find our true identity and really accept who and what we are is to go back to those trauma moments and process them from an adult perspective and understand what it is that that child was dealing with.
This word process, can we go and talk about that a little bit? Because I've been in some counseling myself over the years. I'm a veteran. The VA actually has, in my opinion, amazing counseling, and I have used them to the full extent. Because what a lot of people don't realize is counseling is not just to get you from unwell to well, it's to get you from well to amazing. And so even after I had dealt with a lot of military issues, I still was able to go to them and keep moving forward into better and bettering myself. But this word process, can you talk about processing? What does that mean? And kind of, are there steps to processing? What are the actual actions or mental actions that we can take to process through something like a past trauma?
Well, I think it goes back to the aspect of empathic understanding and unconditional positive regard. At least I know that is what has worked for me. And the issue, I guess, wasn't really that I had never really completely looked at those issues. What I had never really done was extend to myself what I've always extended to my clients, and that is unconditional empathic understanding and that unconditional positive regard. And that is what has made the difference for me. And it's easier to extend that to somebody else than it is to extend it to ourselves. We can treat ourselves horribly, horribly bad, and we do. And I think that's where it begins. But I think that there are other steps, and if you went to my website, you saw horses there. Well, there's a reason for that, because it's not just counseling and therapy and introspection that have made the difference, but my relationship with horses has also helped to really extend that unconditional positive regard to myself. And I can tell you another story in terms of actually working with horses. I had had a horse as an adolescent, and then left that behind when I went into college, and I'd always wanted to get horses back into my life. And I was actually 55 when I realized, if I'm going to have horses in my life, I'm do it now. I'm not getting any younger here. And so I got riding lessons. I had some mentors in terms of helping me to get my first horse. So I got my first horse and went to what they call natural horsemanship workshops. And I was just having the time of my life. I was enjoying every single aspect of that. Well, after several years of that, I began to realize that my horse was not getting the same experience out of this that I was. And so I started looking around for other mentors. I came across Stormy May's documentary, Path to the Horse. It's a beautiful documentary. It's free on YouTube. And it was her journey from traditional horse trainer to actually horse empathizer. And then I also came across the James French's trust technique, enrolled in his program. And for the first time, I really started to be able to develop a relationship with my horse. And just as an example of what that has done, a friend of mine recently purchased a horse, and she wanted what she referred to as a rocking chair horse that she could just get on and have no problems with. Well, this horse turns out to not be the quarter horse she thought he was. He actually has a great deal of thoroughbred blood in him, and he is high-spirited and high energy, and she didn't know what to do with him. She couldn't even get a bridle on him, so she asked for my help. And so I went and helped her, and all I did was stand with this horse in mindful meditation for about 20 minutes. And when she attempted to put a bridle on him, he'd raise his head, he'd actually rear up and back up, and really creating a really dangerous situation there. After 20 minutes of just spending mindful meditation with him, he lowered his head, I slip the bridle on, no problem whatsoever. No training, no coercion, no manipulation, just simple mindfulness. And that's where we not only connect empathically with other species, but that's where we can connect empathically with ourselves.
Wow. A good friend that talks to me about equine therapy all the time. He's heavily involved in it, also another veteran. And he says it's done wonders for him. And being able to apply the same knowledge, not only to other humans, but to ourselves. I've been amazed by this recently. That the Stoics from ancient Greece, and then you've got the yogis from India, and you've got all these different influences that all talk about separating what you can control and what you cannot control, and finally realizing one day eventually that this one person cannot control. I cannot control what anybody else thinks, what they say, what they do, how they act, what they think. The only thing I can control is my response. And my favorite little catchphrase is, my response is my responsibility. A lot of times we react, and that reaction is like a flinch, like an involuntary reaction. And so many of us, me included, we live through 90% to almost 100% of our lives totally in reaction, without any sort of slowing down, pay attention. And so the huge thing I've found, and I want to hear you talk about this and how it relates to with horses and dealing with yourself, is being able to remove that stimulus, whatever it is that you feel like happened to your response. And what I've found is trying to stretch out that time in between the stimulus and the response. And is that something that you found as well? And does that relate to working with horses and also working to accept yourself?
Precisely. Just the example that we were just talking about. That horse was reacting. He had been traumatized, and he was reacting to past trauma. He's not a bad horse. But when that bridle comes up to his head, suddenly he's reacting to past trauma. And the reason that I could slip that bridle onto him after 20 minutes is because of what you just illustrated there. There was time between the reaction, and there was time for him to realize, I'm not in this trauma situation anymore. I'm in a safe and peaceful environment.
And that's the same thing we can apply to ourselves, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yes.
We can say to ourselves, I'm not in this reactionary, I'm not in this same stress response that I was in, even though it might feel the same for the moment. Mm-hmm. We can take that time in between to choose to respond. Thank you, Alan. That's really beautiful. We got on here and we thought we were going to talk about commercial real estate, right?
We're talking about commercial real estate. Yes,
I know. That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So many people want to dig into, how do I figure out the numbers and the this and the that, and what are the actions I take, and tell me the words to say, and give me the script. But so much more of what's going on is exactly what we're talking about. Not dealing with the numbers, not dealing with the brokers, dealing with ourselves.
Absolutely. And you can work through all the numbers, and you can work through all the technicalities of commercial real estate. And until you have an empathic, unconditional acceptance of who and what you are, you're going to screw it up. You just are. I've been there, done that. So, no.
Wow. Can you talk about a little bit from coming back? You after 2008, can you talk about some of the things you did to try to draw back your confidence or your ability to look at yourself with this empathic, unconditional love we're talking about, and unconditional acceptance?
Well, I sat in self-pity for a good long while and finally realized that even though I wanted a lot of pity, what I really needed was to take responsibility and get off my derriere and do something. And so I started a podcast, and believe me, that was a terrifying, terrifying experience. But I knew, and as I'm sure you have heard time and time again, our wealth is in our network. Mm-hmm. And I attempted to go to some local networking events and always fell flat on my face. It's just not the environment for me. But I knew that in a podcast environment that I could invite guests on, and that in a very short period of time I could really develop an empathic connection with them. But reaching out and doing that and starting it was terrifying. And really the first 50 interviews, I approached each and every one of them with trepidation and terror. But I kept on doing it, got better, got more relaxed, and now I have interviewed some 700 different individuals, and I have an extensive network, and it was from this network that I eventually joined the mastermind. And after joining the mastermind, like I had said, it took me a little bit to realize that I'm a capital raiser, not the deal getter, and I didn't want to be the administrator. So that's the journey. And like you, I started that journey I was wiped out. I had nothing. So
everybody loves these success stories, but nobody wants to go through them. They're not fun to go through. It's only good to talk about them now after, but when you're going through it, so if you're somebody out there that's listening that's going through the same sort of thing, maybe things fell apart, maybe you made a mistake, maybe somebody cheated you, but either way, you realize that you need to build for the first time or rebuild. I'm just taking those same steady actions. The biggest thing that I heard from what you were saying is you were taking these steady actions even though they felt terrible. Your fear and trepidation every single time you're about to go on a podcast, and you have to keep, it's just like going to the gym. It's just like starting to run or starting to eat healthy. I'll just let you know, last year I lost about 85 pounds.
Wow.
I didn't realize that.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it's gone.
That's an accomplishment for sure.
Thank you. Exact same steps that it took to get there and to keep going every single day. And you don't see any reaction, you don't see any response, you don't see any results for many, many, many months. Actually, for me personally, it was like 3 months, zero change. Mm-hmm. And I just kept going and kept going. And I knew, I was like, I've never met a single person in my entire life who worked out really hard, right, and didn't get in good shape. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that in my mind. And it's the same sort of thing you're talking about. I've never met anybody who just keeps doing podcasts, who just keeps interviewing people, that doesn't improve their network, that doesn't wind up meeting people that lead them to something else, like another mastermind. That was a great example. Winding up in other masterminds from interviewing people. I've gotten very lucky to be in some masterminds where I've been able to bring those people on, and you'd be surprised that the dominoes start to fall. You have no idea where this one person's going to lead, and it's amazing by keeping doing those steady tasks. So if you're out there, if you're one of these people who's just like Alan and I, wound up at the bottom, wound up where we're starting over, consistent action, the same thing, just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. I'm talking to myself too. Mm-hmm. I've reached a certain amount, good deals, great deal flow, capital coming in, all this kind of stuff. But the steady action of keeping doing it is what makes it grow. It's what makes it actually flourish. It's what makes the deals actually come together. Wow. Well, let's actually do talk about commercial real estate. Okay. So what type of deals have you been raising for lately?
Well, thank you for asking that. We're actually in the middle of doing a capital raise for a portfolio of 3 complexes, and it's a 506c, so I can talk about it. It's a total of 288 units across 3 complexes in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The total purchase price on this is about $48 million, and we are raising $14,000. This portfolio, lost my train of thought here. The return on investment is expected to be average yield of 18%. The cash on cash throughout the course of the whole period, offered SAs within a 7-year period. People can expect to double their money by about 2.24%. And it's an excellent deal from the numbers figure. A little bit of history on this. That we are working with have taken 13 properties full cycle. So this is their 14th endeavor here. They have met their projections in all 13 projects, and they have never had a capital call. Up of that, Murfreesboro is their headquarters. So this, they are the boots on the ground in conjunction with this particular complex. In fact, it's about a half mile from their headquarters. So their experience, their reputation, their track record, and the deal itself makes it a very effective deal. So that's an example of the kinds of projects that we partner with. Any questions on that?
Well, first of all, what do you think about Tennessee?
Tennessee is a growth state, and Murfreesboro, which is about a 30-minute drive south of Nashville, Murfreesboro is in the number 3 spot for projected growth for the next years. And on top of this, of the city ordinances and zoning requirements, they are not issuing any new permits for commercial. And so new competition is not going to come in, and the demand for these properties is only going to increase. And I also forgot to mention the current occupancy rate is at 96%. So it's already cash flowing. And the value add in this is the properties have been pretty well maintained. They just haven't been updated. And so there's no major renovations that have to go into this. The plan is that people vacate the units, we'll do light upgrades just to modernize them, and through that increase rents. But the real value add is in the efficiencies in management. Our partners already own properties in this area, so they already have the property management teams in place. They already have the maintenance teams in place, and so they can bring a tremendous amount of efficiencies to that to reduce costs and increase value through cost reduction at the same time that they're going to raise rents through renovations.
That's awesome. Hey, I'm glad to hear you talk about Tennessee that well. I literally have a call in 20 minutes. You and I are probably going to be commercial real estate neighbors.
Wonderful.
We are right there. I think we're maybe 14 to 20 minutes away from you.
Is that right?
At a property that we're looking at. We're about to start underwriting it. We've been looking at it for a couple of weeks. Excellent. We just had a boots on the ground visit, and this is my first call that I get to have with the team to where we had the boots on the ground, working on the underwriting, and I think this one's going to be a huge winner. And to hear you talk that way, of course, I knew a lot of that about Tennessee, but I'm hearing somebody else who's been in the industry, who's already looking at the area. Great to hear that.
Yeah, in Appalachia, it's an RV park or
yes, sir.
A mobile home park?
Well, it was a golf course.
Oh,
and the
really?
gentleman had already been working on. He owned about 14 golf courses in the area. He had been just working on selling them off. He's retiring. I think he's 74, if I remember correctly. He's got a 124-foot yacht in Alaska, and his new pet project is to go out there in Alaska and hang out and run his marina.
Oh, wow.
And so he's selling off his golf courses and already started to put on RV spots. So we're going to be in negotiation with him. That's what this call at 2 is going to be about, is negotiating what he's going to finish before he takes off. We have basically a minimum number of spots that make sense for us to purchase. And we always try to just get that at a very tight buy box. So this has been a huge solution for me. One of the big things I was taught is figure out how to say no quick. Look at a lot of deals. you don't want to do them all.
Right.
So we maybe look at, with my entire team, probably about 30 people, we might look at 100 to 200 deals per month.
Hmm.
And maybe only 5 or 10 of them ever get to me to actually look at it.
Hmm.
Probably closer to the 5. And a lot of the times, only 1 or 2 are even going to make it through that.
Hmm.
So we've just made it super strict, and this is what we're looking for. We know what brings the high returns, and why would we go and work on something else? And so once we've found those properties that fit, it's really simple. Hey man, it meets this requirement, this one. It's almost like a military checklist. And a lot of the people, I just happen to connect with a lot of other veterans, military people, and they understand checklists. That's a huge part of the military life, is you just follow these checklists. It's, what do they call it? Keep it stupid simple, right? And you just checklist and just do the what it says to do, and that's all we've done. Now that we've got it standardized like that, by the time we get a property through that whole thing, we're like, we know it's going to be a winner.
Yeah.
That's been a huge for us. I just am so thrilled to hear you talking about Tennessee. I've got a couple of other friends that are doing developments in Tennessee, and they're telling me the same thing. And great to hear good news about. I love it there.
Yeah, definitely a growth state. And well, it just had phenomenal growth the last 10 years and projected to continue that. And I don't see any reason why it won't. So yeah, it's like a wonderful deal to get into there.
Yeah, for sure. So back to your deal there. How did you find these operators? How did you connect with them?
Initially through my podcast,
Mhm.
then they ended up being in the same mastermind that I was in,
Mhm.
and so I'm actually I have known them. I knew them 4 years ago before getting involved with them in this deal. So I
Back to
followed them.
relationships.
Yeah. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to develop these things.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you found a real winner. I mean, past deals, all 13 hit their mark, never had a capital call. That's a great record.
Yeah, it is. And that's who we partner with. I'm going to spend a lot of time raising capital and building those relationships. I'm not going to get my investors in fly by night. So
Yeah, I found that that's really important, as I'm the administrator, and I feel like I'm the last stopgap before it reaches I always call them the lead LP, which is just kind of a name I made up maybe. I'd have heard somebody say it, but it's the last one to protect the investor's money, and then they're the one actually speaking with the investors, so they're the last one after me to protect their money.
Mhm.
And so on the administration side, like, a little bit technical for a second, but whenever we do a 506C, there's something called a PPM, a private placement memorandum. And so inside there, whenever I'm setting that up, I always set the minimum investment to what it takes to close on the property. And so I'll give you an example of a deal that we're in right now that we're working on. We're ready to close this deal. Everything's going through. All of a sudden, last second, title issues. Okay, hurry. He's got reasons that he needs to go ahead and close. So it's coming up with solutions, right? And one of his solutions was, well, just close on this one part, which is really the main part that you want, and just give me basically half. And in a couple of weeks, when the rest of the title issues are worked out, you'll close on the other half and blah, blah. Well, one of the ways as an administrator to be the stopgap to protect the investors is I set a minimum of what it takes to close on the property. So I literally cannot do that. Like, there would be a betrayal of my fiduciary responsibility to our investors to go and take half of their money and buy half of the property, because that's not what we said we were going to do in the PPM. To those relationships, even though they're one removed, my capital raisers, trust me so much. Administrator, I'm the manager of the company, I run the bank accounts, I'm the asset manager, I deal with the property management. There's so much relationship I have to have with that capital raiser for them to trust me with their relationships that they've been building. Just like you found these guys, and you're able to trust them.
absolutely, yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we've kind of a lot. Alan, I really want to thank you for sharing your story, for one, and for really talking about a lot of the things that are way more important than a real estate deal. real estate deal is almost like the byproduct of us working on ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really thank you for sharing that. I have a last question also that I'd
Okay.
like to kind of everybody. And it's imagine that right now this is the end for you, Alan. There's going to be no more podcast after this. No one is ever going to hear anything from you ever again, except that this podcast is going out to the entire world. So what would you like to pass out as your final message to the entire world?
Wow, that's a big one there.
I made it easy on you, didn't I?
Discover your authenticity and never betray it.
Well said, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the Bosses Only podcast. Really enjoyed this. More than just having a conversation with another business person, I think you and I are going to stay friends.
I certainly hope so. It's been my pleasure being with you, and I've enjoyed the conversation as well.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, let's people how they can get in touch with you, because there are investors and such that listen to this. How would people reach out and get in touch with you? Say they wanted to find out more about the investments that you raise capital for.
Well, the best thing to do is I have created a system like essentially what we have been talking about, and is designed to fully on professionals who are engaged in exchanging their time, expertise for a living, moving them to developing multiple streams of income so that they can engage more passionately in the work of their calling like they have always dreamed of doing. And so the best way to do that is to a strategy. And during the strategy session, we will clarify vision and what does it mean to them to make a significant and meaningful impact, and what does it mean to them to live abundantly and flourish in all areas of life. We'll help them to solve their biggest challenges to making the impact they've always dreamed of making. And then we will end up setting out a blueprint to move from exchanging their time and talents and expertise for a livelihood to finding financial independence built upon multiple streams of passive income. And the only way I know how to develop that is through hands-off commercial real estate investing. I know there's other avenues out there, but that's the one I know. That's the one I lead people to. So value on this strategy session, it's an hour to an hour and a half long. It's really value at $499. But for your listeners, I'll give them a complimentary session. And during that session, we'll decide whether our visions and our values align. And they do. Our mission is empower professionals to passionately engage in their calling and to make the galactic impact they've always dreamed of making. And so if our visions match and our values match, then we can talk about the program. There's no match, that's okay. We've become friends, and maybe we can talk later, or maybe they can refer other people to me. So no obligation, and it's complimentary. And then go to website, Steed Tucker, like the horse we've been talking about, and Tucker like with empathy, so steedtucker.com. And on my website, go to resources, and they will find a link there for strategies. Click on that strategies and schedule a session.
Awesome. And will you also send me that link, and I'll have Time My Media Guy put it into all the socials and everything to go with this video?
Absolutely. Be happy
Wonderful.
to do that. Yeah.
Alan, so much for coming on. Thank you for paying attention here at the Bosses Only podcast. Please do get in touch with Alan. Get a strategy session. There's probably a link right down here, probably right below us. How much easier can it get than that? You know, pretty easy. Click on there, book you, which might lead you into the direction we're working with Alan, might lead you in a direction somewhere else. But I mean, free value you can get just for watching the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody watching the show, love you guys. I'll see you all next week.
Well, wonderful. Enjoyed it. Enjoyed it. So, Eric, I would love to have you as a guest on my
Okay.
podcast. And so I will send you an invitation and we'll get you booked. Does that sound
Please
okay?
do that. I'd love it.
Okay.
I'm sending this off to Ty, and this will probably be out in about a week or so.
Okay. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.